maybe it will take 15-20 minutes. But the idea is to keep enough time for interaction, to take questions for you. I believe there's a Q&A bar at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any comments or questions, do feel free to enter it. We will keep enough time for discussion and interaction. The discussion or questions don't need to strictly be around just the topic. We can talk about other issues which are broader around. Of course, I will have to keep the boundaries of what's in public domain and not when we talk about the strategies of our companies, and everything that I present today is in public domain. It's just been put together so that all of you can get to see it. So, any comments from any of you before we get started, or any expectations, and then I could factor that in as well. So, if any of you want to type in a comment or an expectation, then we do that. Okay, so I don't see any questions or comments at this stage. So let me get started with the presentation. The team at SP Jain, is the audio clear? And Aditi, if you're on, or I think Jyoti, you're on as well. If any of you have an input on the quality of the presentation or the audio, do let me know. Assuming it's fine. Okay, so what I'm here to talk about is certainly not a success story by any measure. It's really the start of work that we are doing, and some work we've already done, but how we are seeing the future. So it's really not work completed, and by no means are we global like many other MNCs are. But what I'm here to talk about is a thought process and a sharing of what we're doing and some things which are work in progress. So let me get started with where we are today. We are a very large tractor player in the Indian domestic market. Indian domestic market is large. Take a look at the size later. So we are also the number one tractor company in the world by volumes, certainly not by revenues, but by volumes. And in India, we've been leading for the last 3 decades. We have more than 40% market share in India. We have 2 strong brands in India. One is the Mahindra brand, and the second is the Swaraj brand. Swaraj brand is a brand we acquired a few years back, about 8-9 years back, around 2007 time period. A company called Punjab Tractors Limited, which had a brand called Swaraj. And the Swaraj brand has grown significantly through the acquisition process and become a very strong part of our portfolio. We run Swaraj as a separate division, and the focus of Swaraj is very domestic. We are not planning to make the Swaraj brand global. Swaraj will be a very strong domestic brand. And Mahindra brand, as we'll talk about, is the brand which we are working on taking global. We sell more than 200,000 tractors in the domestic market. We have about 10 plants across the country. The Mahindra Tractor Company is the only one in the world to have won the Deming Prize and Japan Quality Medal. So very high level of quality orientation. We have more than 5,000 people, and we are amongst the top 50 best places to work, and amongst the top 3 in the manufacturing sector in the Great Places to Work survey. Now, quick look at the global farm equipment market. So, as you can see from here, it's a $156 billion market. Tractors is $62 billion out of this $156 billion market. And there's a breakdown in the chart in front of you, which talks about the sub-segments of non-tractors, which is harvesting, haying, tillage, and so on. And we really don't have a presence right now in the $94 billion. So if you really look at the $156 billion industry, We are not playing in 94 at all. And in 64, we have a limited presence, mainly India and some other parts of the world. So this data was what was the stimuli for us to start thinking about how we should build a global farm equipment strategy. Oh, sorry. The chart that you have in front of you shows the dispersion of this global agri market. This is tractor plus non-tractor across the world. As you can see, there's some very big pockets, and India is about $7.6 billion. So when you start thinking revenue instead of volumes, then the game and the mindset changes. It's really about how you define the market you're in, which is a very classical management thought process of the tighter you define your market, the bigger you think you're in it. And as you define or redefine the expectation of market size or potential opportunity, you expand your pond to start thinking about a much bigger opportunity. And we really see there's so much happening around the world, and there are big pockets of opportunity around us. Where are we today? And a lot of these are recent additions. So we are strong in Mahindra USA, and I'm going to spend some time in this presentation talking about Mahindra USA. We have been in China for a while, and we have a joint venture. We'll talk briefly about that. India, of course, we spoke about. We have a CKD plant in Brazil. We have one assembly plant in Australia. The two new additions are the acquisitions we've done in the last 1 year. One is in Japan and one is in Finland. And these kind of will be the building blocks or the beachheads of our global strategy. So very quick walkthrough through Mahindra USA. We right now participate in about $5 billion out of the $30 billion industry in US. We are primarily a tractor player, and tractor related implements we have, but we're really not into what's called self-propelled agri implements, that is those which run without a tractor, like the harvester. We have done very well in US, and we are now number 3 in the less than 80 horsepower segment. And we are close to $500 million of business. So in Mahindra USA was established by us in 1994. So it's been a long journey. It's a wholly owned subsidiary. We have 5 assembly and distribution centers in the US and more than 500 channel partners. Our range of products is from 22 horsepower to 80 horsepower. There's a lot of focus on customer centricity. We have a team there which is by and large all American, very, very few Indians, and so it's completely localized and globalized to that extent, where we have people who understand American consumers. In US, we are primarily in what's called hobby farming and not really the hardcore agri segment. 98% of Mahindra USA tractor owners are likely to recommend Mahindra. You can read this data. 97% of our tractor owners are satisfied, and 82% of John Deere owners who also owned a Mahindra would want to buy a Mahindra again. A lot of work has hence been done in building the brand. We've done work over years, but of late we've integrated the communication and advertising in US around the overall rice positioning. And we see this as a kind of template for how we want to build our brand globally. So I'm going to show you 3 commercials and then one of a new product that we have just launched a year back. The 3 commercials, I hope you get to see them. We've had to do them in low resolution so that they work with the bandwidth of the webinar that we have. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Over to you.
Owning land will forever change you. Every acre is a front row seat to watch God paint the sky with sunsets. So Mahindra makes it easy to rise and care for your land for generations to come. That's why 98% of Mahindra owners across America would recommend the world's #1 selling tractor to a friend. It's the smart choice. Mahindra, come rise with us. When you own a piece of land, it's a piece of you. That's why Mahindra wants to help you rise with real workhorses. There's no limit to where you can go with the E-Max. Tackle even the biggest loads with the all-new Impact XTV and tap into true tractor power with the Max. No wonder folks are making the smart choice with the world's #1 selling tractor. Mahindra, come rise with us. Turn the
Yeah, so we just saw the last one, which was the Mahindra Impact XTV. That's a product we launched about 8, 9 months back in the US. It's slightly different from a tractor, but targeted at the same consumer, and has got a very good response right now. So we move on to China. So that's about Mahindra USA. We move on to China. We're the number fifth ranked tractor company in China, and the only global company ahead of us is John Deere. The other top three players are all local. So like we see in the Indian market, local players do have a stronger presence, but we have ambitious plans to move up further. We have a joint venture in China with the Yangcheng Group. We are amongst the most valued tractor brands in China by non-G 360. We have over 300 channel partners and a wide product range from 18 to 135 horsepower. So moving on to how we see the future, we are expanding our global presence. We've done two recent acquisitions. One is we've acquired Mitsubishi's agri-machinery business in Japan, and we've acquired Sampo Rosenloh, which is still in the process of closure, which is a harvester company. So more about these. So Japan is about $3.6 billion. The new company is now called Mitsubishi Mahindra Agri Machinery Limited. We have a 33% stake, but significant board presence and a say in management and strategic decision making. It's about a $400 million company, so fairly large. It's EBIT positive. They have a wide product range. So apart from being a tractor company, and in fact, we sell the Mitsubishi tractors as Mahindra in the US. They're also into rice transplanters and harvesters. They have a strong presence in Japan with over 600 channel partners. And we really see this acquisition as helping us build a farm machinery business focused on the rice value chain. So rice transplanters, rice harvesters is what we want to take globally, starting with building on the capability that's there in Japan. So I just spoke about that. So this is the rice transplanter and the combined harvester rice portfolio that Mitsubishi has. Sampo Rosenlov it has a presence in Europe. They're Finland-based, and interestingly, we didn't know this at the time of when we were looking at this acquisition, but Finland is ranked as the number one country in the world by World Economic Forum on innovation, and we all know that some great innovation and engineering capability comes out of Finland. It's a well-recognized brand across the world, specialist in mid-sized grain combine harvesters. It's sold over 50,000 harvesters to date, and they're a strong player in Europe, Eurasia, and North Africa. In fact, they have a joint venture with the state government in Algeria. And we see this as a center of excellence from where we'll build a global harvester company and will bring harvesters, of course, to countries like India and China, which are emerging markets, but also to build and get into many other advanced markets using Sampo as well. So this is what their product portfolio looks like, just for you to take a quick look. So that broadly was my presentation. So if I have to sum this up, we are primarily a tractor company. A lot of our volume has been coming out of India. We've made presence over the last few years through exports, through presence in China, through presence in USA, and the most significant success we've achieved is actually in the US. We now see ourselves widening, become more global, and interestingly, to move from being just a tractor company to a farm equipment company, focusing on harvesters and focusing on the rice value chain. So really, it's this presentation is about the initiation of a journey. And any thoughts, any inputs, any questions, we'll be happy to take them. So over to you, and please type in your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom. Okay, so sorry, I wasn't seeing the questions. They were on the tab. So there's a question which is from Sunil Bhardwaj, which is, what is the impact of seasonality in the demand planning process? I'm just going to read a couple of other questions. There's a question from Abhay, which says, good morning, Rajesh. Always great to listen to you. Last time for me was during the marketing strategy class in 2003. Wow, that's a long time. And one from Prathamesh, can you please give us some details over the non-farming equipment industry in India? Sure. So let me take these three while others want to add more, and feel free to add questions beyond the presentation, like I said, because the presentation is very topical specific, and I know it's not easy to ask questions on the farming business. When I was in the auto business, I found I wouldn't have been able to think of what questions I would ask somebody who is in the tractor industry. Are we on video? Yes, we don't need that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the first question was how do we handle seasonality as a part of the planning process? Yeah, so this is a very interesting question, and of course a perpetual learning experience. The agri industry, not just in India but globally, is fairly volatile for different sets of reasons. In India, a lot of the volatility comes out of the effect that the monsoons have. Globally, it comes out of variety of reasons, commodity prices being one of them. So if commodity prices are suppressed like they've been in the last year or so, it does suppress overall demand. So I always say that the most important or the key success factor is in this business is how flexible and responsive a supply chain one is able to create. And what that really means is how quickly can you ramp down when the industry is going into a downturn, and how quickly can you ramp up when demand picks up. And this includes managing motivation and morale of the network. This includes managing motivation and morale of the vendor base, and gear, dialing them up and dialing them down depending on what's happening. For anybody who's been in this business, we all know that there are some good years and some bad years. And the good years are ones when we of course enjoy the fruits of the difficult, the effort we put in the difficult times. So the difficult times become the times where we take as an opportunity to make sure the organization stays lean, trim, and agile enough to handle adversity. So there's no easy right answer except to say that it's very cultural, and the supply chain processes have to be very, very responsive, and we have to be able to ramp in and ramp out. And it's a very different mindset to run a business like this. So that was the first question. Okay. The second question was related to non-farming equipment in India. One second. You are able to view the question, Nisha. So why don't you start just getting them down? The non-farming equipment in India is actually very small. So I spoke about a global tractor plus non-tractor industry of about 150 billion. The India non-tractor industry is less than a billion. It's as small as that. And of course, some of it is unorganized, but it's really very small. So, but we see this changing, and one of the reasons why we are focusing on farm equipment globally is to create a portfolio of products which will enable us as market leaders in tractors to grow the non-tractor industry in India by bringing high technology products at affordable price points. So that's how we will use Sampo to make a more affordable, high quality harvester, or use Mitsubishi for rice transplanters and so on. So it's small, but we are hoping it will become big. There's a question related to Tringo. Tringo is a very interesting new initiative we worked on over the last couple of years. It actually came up as a part of our strategy process that we do annually. So interestingly, the rental market in tractors unorganized is very large. It's almost as large as the new tractor market. That's the reason for that is tractor penetration is still low, affordability is low, and many consumers can't really buy a new tractor. So we came up with this idea of what we called Uberization of the tractor industry. So Tringo is really a farm rental business which will have franchisees. So there has to be an on-ground presence because there is smartphone penetration in rural India, but still limited. And there's also an app-based model. We're going to launch in our first state sometime towards in a month from now, and then add 5 more states by August or so. So it's a very interesting experiment, and many people kind of say that don't you think you'll be fighting yourself by launching this year? So that's why it's a separate company. We've just launched a company called Tringo.com, which will fight the new tractor sales. Of course, they would buy some tractors initially. What we think this will do is over a period of time, though, if you really take a long range view on this, it will improve usage of tractors to some extent. It will help farmers improve productivity because they will get better quality implements along with tractors which they can rent. And hopefully prosperity will go up, and then at some stage they'll be ready to start buying new tractors as well. So I think that's one of our very, very interesting initiatives. There's a question related to how can Mahindra be ahead in R&D and how will acquisitions help? So we of course have a huge amount of R&D investment ourselves here in India. And this is a common facility we have for auto and tractors. It's called Mahindra Research Valley. It's in Chennai. It's a very large facility, and just infrastructure alone, we've invested more than $100 million. So those of you who are interested can Google Mahindra Research Valley and take a look at the infrastructure. It's absolutely world class. It's been designed by the very famous architect Charles Fourier. And so that's one part of it. That being said, we realize that this is not enough, and That being said, we realize this is not enough, and we need to build a global R&D capability. And that's when we started looking at the acquisition strategies. So Mitsubishi, like I said, in Japan, will become a product development center for us. We will do the lightweight tractors, which is their specialty, out of there. We'll do everything related to rice value chain, which is rice transplanters, rice harvesters globally from Japan. And everything related to harvesters we'll do from Finland. So these product categories, our product development centers will really be outside India and run out of Finland and Japan. So that's the way we will have to keep moving our R&D capability up to be more global. There's a question related to initial response of American consumers, and then I saw one or two other questions on US. So like I said, we've been US for many years, and it's taken us time to build our brand. We invest, we spend a lot of money on advertising in US. We are on mainline networks like Fox News and so on. Like I said, we are hobby farmers, so a lot of the hobby farmers coincidentally happen to be Republicans who watch Fox News, so that's a sweet spot. We are also on some very popular radio shows and sporting events and so on. So a lot of work has gone into building brand. And of course, at the end of the day, it's not just advertising these kind of product categories. The product has to deliver. Consumers have to be happy with the product. And we have seen that consumers are very happy with our product offering. So it's a combination of investing in brand building, building network, building customer centricity, building positive word of mouth, having good products. So that's on the US. There's a question related to two to four parameters which are important for globalization. Well, I'm just thinking aloud as I take this question. It's very contextual. I think it depends on how well known your brand is as you globalize. So let me answer this question just from the window of the presentation that we had today, rather than trying to do a generic answer to that. So, for example, John Deere does globalize, and it's a global brand, and they have a different set of challenges as they even would come into markets like India. We both know that New Holland and we all know both New Holland and John Deere are very strong brands in globally, but in India, both of them are below 10% market share. So every brand has a different set of globalization challenges. Our globalization challenges are firstly linked to, I think the biggest challenge to globalization normally is the attitude. And once that's in place, then many other actions follow through very smoothly. Most global initiatives do need very sustained investments and consistency of approach. And this is where organizations start faltering, because you can't get a very quick success in a globalization strategy. It needs adjustment of the strategy, it needs adaptation of strategy, it needs continuous investments, because if the market is very different from your home market, often enough the consumers are different, and even though you're creating products to match the needs of those markets, the product itself needs fine-tuning. You're not always able to take your blockbuster product and make it relevant to consumers there. So I think it's the attitude, and one is attitude to longer range investments, longer term investments, having the patience for longer periods for paybacks and returns. The second is, how much of a learning organization are you? How quickly can you learn out of failures and readapt your strategy? And the third is, the right mix between empowerment, which is what do you let your local teams do versus what do you try to control from here. So for Mahindra USA, for example, we don't run a matrixed organization at all. Nobody in Mahindra USA has a dual reporting to anybody in India. It's a company which runs by itself. They have a lot of empowerment. We maybe review them once a quarter or so. So we've not matrixed our organizations. And likewise for the acquisitions, the one we've done in Japan now, we've been almost 8 months into that acquisition. We've only sent one Indian who is on as the CFO. We are really letting local teams run their businesses. Like I said, in US, we do the same thing. SsangYong, which has been a very successful automotive acquisition, also has been run the same way. SsangYong is now over $3 billion, and there are not more than 4 or 5 Indians, all at middle level or level two, one or two at level two. But it's completely a Korean-run business. So the template we are following is really to let local management build the business and provide them synergy support from here. There's a question related to doing business China worthwhile and how strong is government influence. Yeah, doing business in China is harder than one would think. It does look very attractive from the outside. There is a high dependence on subsidy, and that's the reason we have the advantage of a local partner. So we are partners with the Yangcheng Group. They understand the local environment. Our product portfolio in China is by and large local, so we've really not yet launched our Indian range of products there. So it's a product portfolio which we inherited through the acquisition. We're improving the quality and investing in that, but and maybe we will add a few Indian products as we go along. So we're staying very, very local in the way we managed China. There are questions related to the overall manufacturing lean and flexible to handle global supply, and how do you handle localization given that you're going to sell in many countries. Um, yeah, so there's no simple answer to how much to localize from a product standpoint. It is a function of what is the duty structure, logistics costs. So each case really needs individual evaluation, and then you make a decision on what works or not. So to take the illustration of China, it's not been feasible for us to really localize Indian products there, and the cost of localization for the volume opportunity is too high. Uh, and in so we wouldn't localize there. So so I think there's no template of answer for that. One has to evaluate each country and each opportunity individually to see what works and what doesn't work. There's a question related to how Harvester business grows in future. Harvester is close to a $20 billion business globally, right? It's about a 20 odd billion dollar, yeah, 20 odd billion dollar globally. We are zero, right? So we're really not worried right now about whether harvester industry grows or not. Um, our focus has to be how will we get more market share of a very, very large industry. So we are not worried about harvester growth globally. Of course, in India, harvesters is still small, but we see that changing over a 3 to 5 year timeline, and we would want to be the player who is able to introduce more affordable harvesters and drive the pace of change. New business models like Tringo, which are farm rental, will also enable use of equipment like harvesters because that will facilitate affordability. The follow-through question as for US being independent unit, how does the best practices flow across? Yeah, we separate synergy, interface, learning from reporting. So there is, of course, a lot of sharing. We have our communication meets. We have the Mahindra USA team here. We have several people who travel from here to US to facilitate. What I was talking about is differentiating learning from empowerment, and they're two totally different things. So it's very, very possible to share best practices without really burdening them with creating a matrix reporting structure. So we've tried to keep our structures as clean as possible and minimize metrics. And of course, there are pros and cons of that. There's a question here related to, do you think having two different types of dealers for new and used tractors is important, or M&M is targeting existing channel? This is from Prathamesh. I'm not absolutely sure I have the question right, but let me just interpret the question, and Prathamesh, if I have it wrong, then clarify it. So, used tractors, which is exchange of tractors, does happen through the existing dealer network. So, a dealer will buy and sell used tractors. Exchange in tractor industries, at least in the range of 50%. There are states like Punjab, Haryana, which are more mature and saturated, where exchange percentage is over 80%. So that means any new in Punjab, 80% of a new consumer would be in with an exchange. That means he would sell his existing tractor and buy a new one. This transaction is normally done through the dealer network. There is an informal broker network and all, but the dealer fronts end used tractors. Tringo is a different thing. Tringo is not a used tractor market, it's a rental market. And the rentals are of new tractors. So we will, franchisee of Tringo will buy new tractor and new equipment and then rent that out. So that we feel has to be a separate channel, because they are really competing with a tractor dealer for a consumer. Yeah, so the Prathamesh, I think a lot of questions from you. There's how can we tackle seasonality in rental business is an interesting question. The business model takes into account seasonality. So when there is a hiring rate that's decided, and that right now we're going with the market established rates, it assumes a tractor usage of a certain number of hours multiplied by a certain number of days a year, and the rest of the time there is equipment which is, or asset which is not, where asset utilization is low. There are ways to deal with this, and that's because the cultivation cycle or the agri cycle is not exactly the same across the country. Um, so, there is a possibility of moving asset across, but that's not logistically very easy to do. So the plan does factor in that there is going to be asset unutilization for quite a part of the year. Any plans of offering surge pricing in Tringo? No, absolutely not. Uh, it is a very farmer enabling initiative, and we really don't want to uh, go in for a short term buck there, because that's exactly what's happening today. The reason there's so much dissatisfaction in that unorganized industry is concepts like surge pricing, which have been popularized in the management jargon thanks to Uber, but very prevalent in unorganized sectors. There's discrimination on who gets a tractor and who doesn't, based on caste, creed, so many other things. There's a respect which is very low in that industry. So, uh, so really that's what we are trying to change. Could you give some idea of innovations being developed by Mahindra that involves leveraging emerging technologies like Internet of Things? Yeah, there are many things we're doing. Unfortunately, that would be in the domain of not, or in the arena of not being in public domain, so I can't talk about it. There's question related to how RISE platform cuts across geographies and different product lines, which is cars, tractors, two-wheelers. It's a very interesting question. We do, so there is RISE is an internal initiative, and RISE is also consumer-led initiative. We have certain set of values which we want our employees to live by, and we call those the RISE pillars, or the RISE. Um, so the three RISE pillars are accepting no limits, alternative thinking, and driving positive change. So these become like the internal RISE pillars. Different businesses use RISE slightly differently. So when it comes to businesses like tractors, or come to businesses like Mahindra Finance, or some of our commercial vehicles, RISE is about enabling our consumers to rise in life. How can our products and services make their lives better? How can they move up the ladder in life. The way automotive, which is the SUV business, is interpreted, Rise, it's around freedom. And if you really look at Live Young, Live Free, which is the umbrella campaign of the SUV portfolio, it's it's a Rise campaign because their Rise is defined as freedom, which is we enable you to move up in life by getting away from the current reality to a new world, which is one of freedom. And that's really what the spirit of Live Young, Live Free is. So, the commercial or the more prosperity enabling businesses interpret Rise slightly different than the SUV businesses. But really, the underlying philosophy is very similar, which is Rise is about enabling consumers to move up in life. How do you see farm mechanization growth in India? Non-tractor is sluggish. Does India need different machines? Yeah, so mechanization penetration is low. Yes, India needs different machines. They have to be more affordable, and it's a small market right now, and we believe that there is opportunity. There will be greater corporatization of land holding, more corporates getting into farming. All of that will change. All of that will change the way farming gets done. There's a question from Sudhanshu Sharma on what are the critical parameters in decision making, whether to go to market or not, how technology is assisting you in taking decisions. Yeah. The parameters are clear in whether to go to market or not. We obviously look at things like how big is the market, future growth opportunity, nature of competition, who is growing, who is not growing, and do we have a unique product advantage that can go in. We would also look at other things like volatility of exchange rates and ability to invest. So I think the go no go criteria is is fundamental. It's not very different from market to market. It's the judgment on do we really think we have a competitive advantage? Do we use technology to make such decisions? I think technology can only play the role of helping put information together. At the end of the day, what we all get paid to do is to make the calls. And the calls are about judgments. The calls are about interpreting that data. And unfortunately, there isn't technology which can make decisions on our behalf. So we have to use our judgments and our intelligence and our risk taking to help make the calls. And sometimes the calls are wrong. And the question is, how early do you realize that a decision you made is wrong, and how do you course correct on that? And that's what I earlier had said is what one would call a learning organization. So a learning organization is one which would accept mistakes early in the game and start correcting to start improving and adapting the strategy. There's a question related. It's not a very different answer than what I've done earlier, but I'll take it anyway. Farmlands are shrinking in industry, and the industry is at crossroads between manual labor and automation. How do you see India farm equipment grow in future? While I think it can be explosive, it is constrained by size of land holding. Yes, size of land holding is a constraint. What is most intriguing though in the Indian context is, in spite of all the unemployment, there is still a huge labor shortage on farms in India. And if you go around the country, and I do that a fair bit, and talk to farmers or landholders, what is their number one issue? Their number one issue is labor availability. Because there's been a lot of migration away of labor either to bigger towns or to industries, or there is a bunch of people who either because of the employment guarantee schemes or so on earn easy money and really don't want to do the hard work of working 10, 12, 14 hours a day on a farmland. So mechanization is, and that's the reason we are seeing much more of mechanization. It's right now more labor shortage linked rather than a linkage to the need for productivity. I do see that land holding consolidation is going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. It's some of it will be intervention from the government, and some of it is just going to be allowing corporates to come in or lease land holding policies to change to enable larger parcels of land. We see a lot of that happening in horticulture. Horticulture has now become very, very big segment, and that's we see large land parcels in horticulture and grapes and so on. So I think it's a question of time before it passes on. There are two contrasting approaches. Players like John Deere and New Holland moving from high tech to low tech when expanding to developing world, while Mahindra is making reverse journey of moving up on tech ladder. Which approach has been more successful in other industries? I think it's adapting to consumer, and the way we see it is we would want to establish ourselves firstly as a technology leader or pioneering technology in our home market. So want to we would want to we would want to push ourselves up the technology perception scale in the domestic market higher than MNCs, and that's one set of things to work on. That being said, the one thing we realize and we have to be very mindful of is that technology has to be relevant technology and has to be affordable. And this is where the frugality of our Indian approach will allow us to provide technology at better costs and get better price points to consumers. Um, so there's again, Don, there's no easy answer to this. We have to move up the value chain, but not lose relevant and affordable price points. That's the way we would see it. There's a question related to Africa, will be one of the biggest agri producers. Yes, certainly Africa, everybody is talking about as the next big thing. And there are many opportunities related to pure agriculture, and of course, then that will impact tractor and mechanization as well. Uh, we all think about Africa as one Africa. Unfortunately, it's not. It's highly, highly heterogeneous continent, and different parts of Africa and different regions of Africa are entirely different. So when one talks about Africa, one has to be very clear which part of Africa we are talking about, and what's the ease of doing business, what are the risks related to letters of credit, foreign exchange. There's the whole area of corruptibility of government. A lot of the business is still very government-led. And what are the risks or consistency of operating in different markets in Africa? So really, Africa is, yes, a huge opportunity, but how to succeed in Africa is something many companies are still in the process of figuring out. For us, Africa is an important initiative. We have set up a combined Africa business organization for auto and tractors, which allows us to have more feet on the ground and more local talent in some selected parts of Africa, because we feel to succeed in Africa, we have to have more on-ground presence. But it's something that we will learn as we go along. In the Tringo business model, if a farmer taking equipment on rent damages it, how are damage costs addressed? The farmer may not be able to pay damage if he rents out the equipment because he does not have enough finances. So, yeah, I guess these are things we will learn as we go through the business model. It's going to be launched in end of June, like I said. And this is all part of adapting the model. We have piloted this for a while. We've not faced any significant issue of this kind. One of the reasons we are going through a franchisee is because the franchisee is better able to handle such local issues than we may be able to do. Can you elaborate on customer centricity and how that is shaping decisions at FES? Hi, Monica. Good to see that you're here. For those of you who don't know, Monica is my classmate at SP Jain in the 86 batch. Uh, so the tractor business, more than any other business that I've interacted with, is totally dependent on customer centricity. Because while we hear a lot about viral marketing, social media led, word of mouth, all of that, these are more recent phenomena in the urban world. In the rural world, viral is the way the society works. How well your tractor performs and how well it's serviced in a village of 500 people is known within 30 seconds. There's no need for Facebook or a Twitter or a social media for that word of mouth to spread. That word of mouth spreads in 30 seconds. And the minute your tractor has a problem, there is no resale price for that. The most important consideration in a tractor industry is that one day of tractor downtime and the farmer could lose his entire season of work. And that's even more significant than what happens in commercial vehicles, because in commercial vehicles, you have one day of downtime, you lose one day of revenue. Not so in tractors. You have one day of downtime, the farmer can't do work, or 2 days of downtime, and he's lost the only small window of time he had to do his land preparation. So product reliability, product performance become very, very, very significant. And that's really what customer centricity is about at the end of the day. And that is hence the most important consideration. There's some question related to poll feedback that's coming up. That's for the audience. Will it make sense for the new Mahindra Agri business to hitch a hike with FES in globalization? So as for those of you who don't know, we have set up an agri business vertical different from the farm mechanization vertical. So I look after the farm mechanization vertical. A colleague of mine, Ashok, is handling agri business, which is really more for they're looking at pulses, they're looking at they're into seeds, crop care, so on and so forth. Firstly, there is a fair amount of synergy opportunity within the domestic market itself. The agri business has something called Samriddhi centers, which are agri advisory services. A lot of the tractor dealers, in fact, are the Samriddhi centers, and we leverage the advisory service for giving greater value to tractor customers over and above that being a separate independent business model. Likewise, in countries where we would go in as a part of globalization in farm mechanization, wherever there is an opportunity, we would want to work, and we would work closely with agri business. Agri business's core strategy, though, is more domestic compared to the way we are now looking at the farm machinery strategy. There's a question related to one shift Mahindra is making tractor to non-tractor, which shift from physical to digitally global. Is the other moves in that direction which are shaping the way the companies think about solutions? For customers, yes, solution selling and I just spoke down about Samriddhi is all part about how we will add greater value to customers. Also adds on to the question Monica had, which is on customer centricity. Customer centricity, one aspect I addressed was service orientation, product performance. But advisory is a very key thing. Our Samriddhi centers do soil testing and so on, all of which are very value adding for consumers. The question on government laws. Done? Okay, wonderful. There's a question from Hanos on other government laws around the monitoring and control of pollution levels of farm equipment, either in India or your global markets, and how is Mahindra dealing with it? Yes, of course, there are emission norms and all of that, and products have to meet those emission norms. And every country has a different level of emission norm, which gets decided. So when we're in China, there's a China-led emission norms in India and likewise in USA. So certainly emission control, pollution control is laws govern farm equipment. There's a question from Nishant, and could you please touch upon key challenges you're facing in providing consistent after-sales service to the end consumer and how they're addressed? We'll take this as the last question since there are about 4 minutes left. The biggest challenge in providing a consistent after-sales service really is that we are dependent on a dealer network. And I think this is a kind of business model that all the automotive companies are used to running, including farm equipment companies. We all operate through dealers. We are hence dependent on a dealer to do all that he has to do to meet needs of consumers and their after-sales requirement. And that does create challenges sometimes. So if you may have a problem with a network partner at some stage, the partner is separating, or we are not happy with the performance of the partner, we are initiating separation. It does create at times a gap in the ability to provide service. And of course, we would try to make it up by using network which are in closer areas or whatever. But yes, we are dependent on our dealer network, and it does and can lead to consistency issues in after sales. Spares availability becomes one such factor because as models become obsolete, tractors, I mean, you can go into the field and find tractors which are 30 years old, 40 years old. I mean, they just run and run and run. And, a lot of these parts have been locally developed and available in the aftermarket, but we do provide for 8 or 10 years committed part support. So there are challenges, of course, in this industry. So we have a couple of minutes left. I just want to thank all of you for a very stimulating session. There were lots of very, very interesting questions, many of which do help us think about how we should do this business differently and taking these inputs into developing and evolving a better strategy. Thanks again, and thank you, the SPGen team, for all the efforts that you've done to make this seamless and consistent quality of communication. Thanks again, and look forward to many such interactions with other alumni. Thanks, Aditi. So we're signing off with this.
Then you can speak. नहीं नहीं तो 5 years